All right, welcome to Buying Gold Coast. I'm excited for this one. You've asked, I've listened, a bit more solo eps this year, and on this show, we've uncovered some amazing stories the past few weeks, and I've really appreciated all the feedback with those. But today, I'm actually going to go deep on a solo one. I'm actually going to uncover a little bit of my personal journey too, in the hope that it's going to not only inspire but also add some significant value for anyone not only looking to get into the property market. I've got some key tips there, but also people who want to expand a property portfolio to achieve some financial wealth and freedom. So today is all around how I secured 10 properties in under 10 years. And I'm actually going to give you 10 key lessons jam packed, and I'm going to go deep. So get your notepad out, and I'm going to really share my personal journey and give you some serious tips that I wish I had the cheat sheet when I started on this journey under 10 years ago. So this is how I secured 10 properties in under 10 years and my 10 biggest lessons. So to give you a little bit of context, I bought my first property literally 10 years ago. I would have been 23, and I'm coming up to 33 now. So I've just reflected. It's been such a journey. It's gone super quick, but I feel we always underestimate what we can get done in a day, and we severely underestimate what we can get done in a decade. And if you were to tell me, I'd have, the portfolio I have now 10 years ago when I just started, it was definitely nothing I would have thought of at all. I always had a vision and a goal, but hopefully today will give inspiration as well that anything is possible if you can put your mind to something, you educate yourself, and then you get the right people around you as well. So just super brief context too on my background. Obviously, people know I was a former athlete, things like that. But actually in school, I was actually in English communication class. I was in maths, what they call it, pre-vocational maths as well. So I was definitely not great at school. I just got by. Luckily, there was sport at school that got me through. And it was really tough for me. I just wasn't a learner in terms of like books and things like that, which is crazy because I love reading now, but I just really struggled in school. I definitely wasn't a ducks in the class. I always had to go, but numbers were really hard, and even English and writing essays, things like that, I barely passed C's and D's and things like that. So I didn't go for an OP either. I just got by grade 12, and luckily sport was my out, but that just gives a little bit of context too, because sometimes we can get clouded in people who have achieved great things. But yeah, you sometimes you just got to remember where they come from too. So my mum was from the Philippines. My dad was from Poland, both immigrants, came here with nothing, didn't grow up with much. A lot of love in the home, but I always had my brother's hand-me-downs and things like that. So I grew up in Western Brisbane, in Inala in Forest Lake. So anyone who knows there, it's the hood. I'm proud of where I come from, but now I'm on the Gold Coast, and really proud of my journey. So I just give that context because again, I'm about to reveal the way I've been able to, and I don't do this more to boast. It's more people always ask me about my journey, and I don't like to share it too much. But today I'm actually going to lift the hood. So where it is today, we're about to secure 10th property. 16 different streams of income, so 16 rental properties, and I'll explain what that means in a second, and an overall portfolio growth of just under 80%, so 78.95% growth in under 10 years too. So I'll reveal how I did it, and here's 10 key lessons how. So number one, its journey started for me when I was 23, and my biggest tip in this journey at property number one was to surround myself with good noise. And what I mean by that is I got absorbed into, YouTube. Podcasts actually weren't a thing back then, believe it or not, but I got really into YouTube and magazines. And all that did was it just expanded my mind to what is, I guess, possible. So for me, I really made intention that every single day I was going to listen to something to do with property. So again, I love the YouTube that I just typed in property investment or property and things like that. And I just kept flooding my mind with good things. What that led to, I'm not sure. But tip number one is just surround yourself with what you want to do, because the more you can surround yourself, again, I didn't have too many mentors and people. As I said, my family came from very humble beginnings, and buying lots of property was not part of that at all. So tip number one was just surrounding myself with the right education. Yes, that's sometimes people, but you can also do it through, again, I think we're blessed these days, podcasts, books, seminars. There's so much you can do. So I remember I went to every seminar I could get my hands on. I read all the magazines. I did all the things. And again, it just got me inspired. And that's what I hope this podcast episode will do too. Just giving you inspiration as well. So that's from number one, and secured that one. Just quickly, that was literally one of the scariest decisions of my life. It definitely was. And just a side story too, and it's another, I guess, key lesson on top of that, was that sometimes your family love you and they want the best for you, but it's not always the best advice. And what I mean by that is, I remember for 18 months, I didn't actually tell my family that I bought a property, because for them, they were back in the olden times where you bought things in cash, and to take on any sort of debt was a taboo. So for me, that was really hard growing up in a household where debt was, feared. So for me, there were some positives in that, but when it came to buying property, I was really worried because my parents were very anti-debt and, no risk, things like that, which served them well. But from my studying and learning, I actually thought I can really leverage certain situations. So they wanted the best for me. They obviously loved me and they appreciate what I was doing. They just wanted the best for me. I didn't believe it was the best decision though. So I literally held off for 18 months because they didn't want me to do it. And I ended up buying, and I ended up telling my parents like literally a year and a half later. And still to this day, it was one of the best decisions I made. I'm glad. I love my parents so much, but I'm glad I actually didn't listen to them. Otherwise, that first property wouldn't have set me up for what's about to come. So that's where the journey started. So 600K, the deposit I saved up was around 110, 120, was around the 20% plus costs and things like that. So I managed to turn this 120K into close to 8 million asset value, which I'm about to reveal the steps in a second. So again, I'm just bringing you back to the start. Number two was an interesting one. So this was my first expansion into an investment property. So a property I actually wasn't going to live in, because that first one I actually lived in. So my second key learning is that you can actually leverage the property you live in to buy rental properties. I know it sounds simple, but there may be people listening to this right now that, you've done the one property and you're proud of that, and it's such a great achievement just to get that first one. But when you actually understand how equity works and how like growth works and things like that, you can actually leverage your current owner-occupied property into another property that essentially the tenant can kind of pay for the mortgage. So when I started learning around that kind of flicked a bit of a switch for me there. So my biggest learning for property number two, which was on the Gold Coast actually, it was a unit in a block of 8. I secured it in the low threes from memory. It might have been 305, which is, again, at the time, scary, but again, that's the market and that's what it does. This stage, it's probably worth 750 to 800. So I remember at the time, 305 was a big number. So I just found it very interesting that, all right, I've got a roof over my head, but now I'm trying to get property that I'm going to rent out. So it was a nice mindset shift. Again, first time doing it, very scary. So if you are someone who's scared of that kind of process and, you might be second guessing yourself, just again, that's why it's important to surround yourself and listen to people who are doing it, because you'll realize everyday people are achieving great things. They're not special at all. Just like me, I'm a very ordinary person. So that was tip number two on property number two, was that you can actually use your owner-occupied property for an investment property. All right, number three. This was an interesting one. So I started again. This was probably getting into year 3, so I was probably 25 at this stage. Had 2 properties under my belt, and I started really enjoying it. I started getting the fruit of the rental income coming in and seeing the slow, steady growth of my first 2 properties. Number 3 was an interesting one. My big lesson with this one was I'm not going to live in it. So why don't I look in other suburbs outside of where I live? And why that was a game changer for me was that I see a lot of investors when they start is they want to buy in their own backyard. And hands up, I did too. I did that. If I was to reflect back on time now, could I have put that money elsewhere in another market that I actually didn't live in? And would I have made more? Probably, yeah. So my advice is, and tip number 3 on property 3 is that because you don't live in it, don't get too emotionally attached. Like there are other suburbs around Australia, around the world really, but around Australia that are performing very well as investment properties. You don't actually have to buy an investment property in the city you live. So this was my first experience buying outside of the Gold Coast. Again, super scary. I didn't know what to expect. And I'm hoping these first 3 properties just highlight every single one was very scary. Like I came in front of some discomfort and some second guessing for each one of them so far. So I always believe, nothing grows in the comfort zone. So you really got to expand your comfort zone and take bold, calculated risks. So property number 3 was in a suburb, northern Brisbane, called Deception Bay. And again, I went there because of the fundamentals. I've seen a lot of similarities between there and Palm Beach. One of the first suburbs I invested in was that it was a little bit rough. It was gentrifying, I call the word. They both had Centrelinks in the suburbs. But the key thing I realized was this. I looked at the actual suburbs themselves, and there was water to the east. There was established suburbs to the east and west. And my brain started thinking, if more people move into this area, you cannot build more property where the water is because you can't build on water. And really, there's no other land available because there's established suburbs in the neighboring suburbs. So I call them infill suburbs. You really want to buy in those kind of suburbs. I seen because the demographic was a little bit, rougher. I'm not afraid to say that. The suburbs around were actually quite affluent. So for me, I'm thinking in my head, as more people move into the area because migration's growing, a lot of the roughness is just going to get organically priced out. So I actually don't mind buying in some of these areas because I know in the short course of time, it's all going to get priced out anyway. I've seen it happen in Palm Beach on the Gold Coast too. So that was scary, obviously buying outside of the Gold Coast. And property number 3, the tip was, again, look at the fundamentals, but don't be afraid to buy in areas outside of where you live. So that one done really well. Just a standalone home, 3-bed, 1 bath. Think got it in the high 2s in a suburb called Deception Bay, which is still performing quite well up there in that kind of Moreton Bay kind of region up there. Now we started getting serious. I was like, all right, I'm kind of loving this. Loving this kind of property thing. So where the next property took me was to another section of Brisbane, but on the other side of Brisbane. So my biggest lesson for property number 4 was don't listen to a lot of the naysayers. So I remember there was pocket of Brisbane and it was called Logan, and a lot of people from Queensland would know Logan and have a stereotype around it, right? And I can only say this now because it's 10 years on, right? They have literally been my best performing properties, the ones in this suburb of Logan in particular. And I'll reveal in a second, I actually bought another few in there. But Logan, why I liked Logan was essentially, it was, again, I'm following the trends of where my borrowing capacity could take me, but I wanted to get as close to a capital city as I could. So key things I looked at for this one, and why I say my lesson, don't listen to the naysayers, is a lot of people are like, Matt, you're crazy. Like, do not buy in some of those suburbs. And I just sort of said, instead of trying to increase my borrowing capacity and waiting to try and get in, a really affluent area, for me, I believe the growth in some of these areas is going to occur. I've seen the data. It's going to occur. So I would rather put my money in there now for what I can afford. As the city grows, I can then grab the equity and then start purchasing in better areas after that. So again, that was my biggest lesson, is don't listen to naysayers. A lot of people who were telling me these things didn't have the goals I desired. The people who had portfolios of 20, 30 properties, some of my mentors I surrounded myself with, accountants, brokers, etc., they actually had properties in some of these areas as well. So I noticed the trend. If I wanted to achieve what 1% of society can achieve, and that's owning, over 6 properties, I needed to do what 99% of people were not doing. So that's why I always say, don't listen to the naysayers. Listen to people who are where you want to be. So that one in Logan, freestanding home, 4-bed, 2-bath. That was, again, scary. I think that was in the 350s at the time. I know it sounds crazy now, but at the time, that was a lot for my borrowing capacity where it was when I was just transitioning out of pro sport. I was on like minimum wage. I think my salary was only in the 50s, low 50s. So to give people perspective, like my borrowing wasn't amazing back then, but I knew I needed to stay the course of time with the property building portfolio. So my biggest lesson for property number 4 was don't listen to the naysayers. So secured that one and just rented it out straight away. Didn't even need to do any work, just a brick and tile low set in there. What I noticed in that Logan region was it was doing things. It was like moving quickly. And I'll just say this on Logan, right? And I say this for the Gold Coast too. There's pockets within pockets. So there are definitely pockets right here on the Gold Coast that I love, and there's pockets that I'd stay away from. Same in Logan, same in Deception, but same in every single part of Australia. There is a postcode, but there's also pockets within the postcode that are good, and there's some that you stay away from. There's streets that you stay away from, and I really did my due diligence in Logan. And I won't reveal too much on specific suburbs, things like that, but if you're an investor and you've invested in Logan, you'll know what I mean. There's Logan and there's Logan. There's different sections, and I always I didn't care how cheap some of the certain suburbs were. I wanted to stay. I had about 6 suburbs I did not touch because not only flood zone, but the crime rate was a lot higher. I didn't want to attract a too poor of a tenant that was going to potentially, I could potentially pay for that in terms of damages to my property, things like that. So I had that balanced approach where I liked the area, but I really try to stay to more affluent pocket of those areas. So my lesson for number 5 was research slow, but buy fast. So research slow, but buy fast. So what I mean by that is this is property number 5, and I started getting confident. I started like, you know what, I'm liking this. I think I can build something. I had that little bit of like hope now, and like, man, I seen my first 4 properties actually accelerate in growth, and I was starting to use equity and recycling it, things like that. And what I noticed was like, wow, it's true what they say, like property is a get rich slow vehicle. I didn't really feel any different in the first 1 to 2 years, in all honesty, just doing its thing. And I was like, oh yeah, it is what it is. But I feel you start to really feel the benefits of property in sort of year 3, 4, 5 and moving forward. So again, I can only say this because I've had one good cycle now of 10 years. So property number 5, it was again in a suburb in Logan, close to hospital, schools. It's called Logan Lee, actually. It was a really good suburb just off the motorway. I really liked it. Big blocks in there. I found an 800 square meter. It was at the property was at the front northeast section of the block, and I had intention, hopefully one day, to put a granny flat on it to improve the rental yield. So, but my lesson for property number 5 was research slow, but buy fast. So I got better at buying property. I got better at understanding what constitutes a great property deal. I started looking at not only migration levels, employment. I started looking at gross floor area, GFA. I started looking at land size. I started looking at, okay, why does this suburb average sale price for a 3-bed, 1-bath is different to this suburb? And I started looking at trends. I started looking at rental yields. I started looking at rental pressure. I just got better. I spent a lot of time researching. I spent a lot of patience looking for the next property. I realized it's not always about just rushing in and buying something. I always say research slow to buy fast. The reason is this particular property number 5, I remember it popped up, and within literally an hour, I called the agent and I said, what will buy it today? This agent was not from the area. Bless her. She was literally from like a completely, not even a different suburb. She's from a completely different region. And you could tell she didn't want to hold on to this property too long. Anyways, circumstances, it was uncertain circumstances with the vendor. I got good at asking questions in the negotiation. She told me what would buy it today. I said, what about if I gave you a clean price at X? And she said, well, put it on paper. I put it on paper. Literally an hour later, deal was secured and done. And why I say that is I spent probably 3 months intimately researching this area. I'm talking intimately. I knew the sale price of everything. As soon as I seen this one come up, and as soon as I heard what came out of her mouth in terms of what would buy it today, I knew I was getting a deal at least 45 to 50K below what it should be worth. So again, no need to haggle, no need to go back and forth in the negotiation, just wrap it up. So that I just went bang, I'll take it. And then I did that. So my biggest lesson there is sometimes it's about researching slow, but then buying fast. So I secured that one literally within 3 hours max before viewing, negotiating, signed, sealed, delivered. So big tip on that one. And I had confidence because I was kind of buying more now. So that's property 5. Property 6, this is a good one. This is probably one of my favorites of all time. So property 6, I'm well and truly on the way. 6 was always a number. I'm not so big on quantity. I'm all about quality. But I don't know. I just heard a stat one day. If you own more than 5 properties, you're in like the 0.008% in Australia. Less than 20,000 people have more than 5. And again, for some reason, whether it was just like a self thing, I just wanted to at least get to that because I could say, I knew it, I could get in the top 1% of people doing property. So this was a big one, property 6. What a key lesson here was that I needed to get in the helicopter, and I'll explain why. There's a bit of a story attached to this one. So by this time, what would I been? Probably 28 now, 28 at this stage. Got 5 properties under the belt. The 6th one here. I launched a business, a buyer's agency, which a lot of people know me for now, but I was kind of in my first year of business, I think. And it's just insane how many off-market properties we get access to on the Gold Coast. Like it's phenomenal. And, you can't see, and I know a lot of our clients would get it, but some of the absolute banger deals we get presented day in, day out is just phenomenal. And as an active investor as well, it's excite me that I can pass some of these on to people and give them the education that I've learned. So the next one took me back to the Gold Coast because I seen the Gold Coast starting to really, really fire up. So I was like, I want to get another asset on the Gold Coast. I ended up in a suburb called Mermaid Waters, and this is how. Long story short, as I said, our clients get access to some amazing off-market property. I presented a particular property to an investor who was based actually down in like the Tweed region, just wanted to park their money, busy professionals, good incomes, had the owner occ, wanted to now buy an investment. And we're looking for a few weeks and found an absolute perler, Mermaid Waters, northeast rear, 550 square meter flat block, over 10 meter frontage. I think it was like 15 meter frontage. If you built up as well, you actually get skyline and water views. It was actually on a waterfront street. It was the only home on the street that wasn't a waterfront as well. And why I love that is because the average sale price in this street was like in the well and truly 2.5, close to 3.5 million. And there's this just absolute ugly duckling on this street. It is so bad to look at. And I remember the vendor in there, I got access to this through a relationship of an agent on the Gold Coast. And they told me the story. Look, they will take it to market, but it is not presented. I'm talking, if you think of clutter, times it by 10. Like there was crap everywhere. I got through it, and I could sniff potential a mile away, because I knew this current vendor, it would take them so long to clean this thing. You know, the agents didn't want to take it to market because it would have taken ages to get it presented for sale. You could not even show people through this thing. But I knew the dirt it was on. It was absolute prime Gold Coast real estate. I told the client came out and visited the property. We did a building. We got it under contract straight away. We got the building and pest done, and the building and pest, obviously it's an older style property. I'm expecting at least 50 to 100 grand worth of damage and water leaks. There'll be everything. I didn't mind. Anyways, building and pest came back, and it wasn't too bad. The water damage in one of the showers was bad. It needed not only resealing, a bit of pulling up the tiles, and then it'd be fixed. And that was it. Literally, that was the only thing. A few little like bumps and bruises, all repairable, easy. The only key damage, and we got a quote, it was $16,500. So $16,500. There's a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. That's a lot of money. I said to the client, the price we were able to negotiate it for, I think we're at least $200,000 below what it's worth. And I don't say that lightly. I say that confidently because I know the market inside out. We work here. Again, we never force anyone into any opportunity. It's always their call. And this client, unfortunately, the 16.5 was too scary. And, I told him, you fix that and you're still up a fair bit in money. Long story short, pulled out of the deal, and yeah, it wasn't for him, which is totally cool. We support any client that wants to do that. I then got on the phone to my broker and said, hey, I want to buy a property today. Can you make it happen? We made it happen, bang, like that. This is what my big tip on properties, right? You need to jump in the helicopter quickly. You need to jump in the helicopter. So what I mean is, for this exact scenario, 16, say 20 grand. It was about 20 grand worth of damage. I knew it was about 200 grand below market value. Scary at the start, but I quickly jumped in the helicopter, right? And I put myself 5 years time where I'm sitting today, 5 years time. I put myself when I was age 33. As I said, it was like I would have been 28, 29. So literally I put myself in the 5-year helicopter. I had a quick look. What do I think the property would be worth in that time? Confidently, I said probably mid ones. We had a contract price of $1 million. So I felt I could make around 500 grand in under 4 years. And in my head, I'm just like, yep, it makes sense. It makes complete sense. It's scary, but it makes sense. So what I did was I did it. I paid the, 16.5 grand, got the immediate fixes, left everything else, got it rented out straight away. That particular property got valued the other day at 1.8 million. 1,800,000. I looked at the date purchase. As I said, I think I was about 29 coming on to 30. Now I think about it. So what's that? 30, 31, 32. 3 years, $800,000 difference. So if you don't get in the helicopter, and again, hope the client isn't listening, and again, if he is, it also just highlights, why it's like you get people in your corner who can give you good advice too, because I'm sure some people would have told him, oh, that's a lot of damage. But in my eyes, I'm thinking, I don't know many job opportunities that could give you $800,000 in what's that, 2 to 3 year period. So that is life-changing amounts of equity and money. So sometimes my biggest tip for that one is, yes, it's scary in the moment. Yes, there's going to be things and costs associated. Yes, there's going to be repairs and maintenance. But if you just quickly realize that property is a get-rich-slow vehicle, put yourself in the helicopter quickly and just have a look from up here. Because sometimes the procrastination of inaction is actually going to cost you more. So that is my biggest tip with properties like that, because that one property, even though, yes, it's a rough one, few maintenance, things like that, it has actually made me the most money still to this day. So that's property number 6. Property number 7 and 8, this is where it gets interesting. What I realized now was I had a good solid portfolio of capital growth properties. So a lot of my properties were in really good areas, I believed, and they've all doubled and tripled. A lot of them actually tripled. Some of those ones that I bought property, my portfolio from number 1 to 5 have pretty much tripled. So what I say to everyone is there's also a balance. So what happens? The more debt you accumulate, the more your value goes up, but also you're a bit of a bigger risk now to the banks. So you have to make sure your borrowing capacity also matches. So what I always say is capital growth is what makes you wealthy. Cash flow is what helps you hold the portfolio. So yes, I agree capital growth is super strong, but if you've got a full portfolio that's heavily negatively geared, all it's going to take is one bad move and your whole portfolio is gone. You'll be sunk underwater. Having everything negatively geared, I think, is a scary strategy. You don't want to be forking out too much in there. I believe you need a good balance of both. So property number 6 and property number 7, my key lessons were this. I started looking at unit blocks. So that's what I was saying at the start. Even though there's 10 properties, there's 16 streams of income. So what I started to do was actually buy the whole block. And it's just like when you're playing Monopoly, right? And you buy the single home, and now we're getting the block. So now there's different streams of income on the one asset. So what I did was I secured a property in Queensland, and this one property number 7, was a unit block. It was a block of 4. So there was 4 units on one title of land. So why that was key was we were achieving rental yields on these things at around 8 to 9% from the get-go. What that did was I dramatically increased my borrowing power because I had a lot of equity, but I wanted to be careful of my cash flow too. So I did a cash flow injection purchase with a unit block to improve the cash flow I was representing on my balance sheet. I knew some of these properties, they weren't in high growth locations, still high growth locations, but not as high as the Gold Coast, not as high as Brisbane, things like that. They were in sectors that were going to get really slow growth that I was confident in, but I didn't mind around the growth. I had enough growth here. I was looking for solid cash flow. So again, every single 6 to 12 months now, the rental yield keeps getting better and better and better. One thing as well with unit blocks that I found was a bit of diversification. So if one tenant moves out, you've still got 3 other streams of income. Someone moves in, you got 4, someone moves out. So the tap's always on. So that's why I sort of say, are you in a stage of your portfolio where you might have some steady growth, but you're capped in terms of borrowing? Maybe you need to pair it up with some cash flow properties. So that's why I really love unit blocks, because they're a really easy way to inject cash flow, own a good asset as well. So instead of buying like a high-rise unit, low scarcity, things like that, I still think unit blocks have great growth because you control the whole block of land, the whole thing. So that's my big tip for property number 7 is I call it pigeon pairing. I heard it somewhere. So sometimes if you've got high capital growth, you want to pigeon pair it with some high cash flow. That's a nice balanced portfolio in my opinion. Property number 8, again, I went another unit block. This one was a block of 5 now. So again, I started getting more confident. I started learning more. This one was a commercial loan. I got 5 units on one block of land. This was the interesting thing. With residential property, and this is a good learning, with residential property, all of my properties I bought, hold, I renovate, and then I strip the equity out of them. When you renovate a residential property, you go back to the bank and they'll value the property based on what it's worth, right? With the unit block, what I've found is this. It gets valued on basically the gross rent per week. So if you can improve the rent per week on the unit block, you could go back to the bank quickly, say, hey, this is the new rent per week total of all the 5 units, and they will value it off of that. So here's a good example. This property number 8, it was a block of 5, very rough, worst house, best street vibes, low set, brick, had a few bumps and bruises, very basic. Each one was renting out for about 250 to 300. I got it under 800. It was about 750, and I was renting for like $1,200 a week. Pretty good. But this is what I'm going to do with it. And I haven't done it yet, but this is what I'm going to do. At a point in time, I think I'm waiting for one more of the units, the lease to run out. I'm actually going to get a renovation. I'm going to pause all the leases. I'm going to renovate the whole thing, all 5 units. I'm going to get them released, every single 5 unit, at a different price point now, rent per week. I'm going to go back to the bank and show them this is now my rent per week. They are going to give me more money to play with because the valuation goes off the rent per week side of things. So why uniblocks can be super beneficial is you can manipulate the equity a lot quicker. So you're not always relying on just the suburb or city growth. You can manipulate the growth through a cosmetic renovation just by boosting the cash flow on each individual unit. So that's one thing I realized with uniblocks, and why I've really liked them at different points in my portfolio is that I can kind of play around with the equity piece a little bit there. So, and just a side note too, I'm not doing the work personally. I always make sure I get people and professionals to do it. Some people like to do it themselves, but again, if you're like me, not handy at all, doesn't mean you can't do renovations. Hire good people, and pay them fairly too. And again, you'll feel the benefits on the back end. And obviously, everything tax deductible. Talk to your accountant though. So not financial advice, but yeah, that's a really good one with the unit blocks. And the last two. So as we move into the end of the episode, number 9's an interesting one. I actually secured and built a granny flat, and I put it on property number 5 that I secured. So that one I was telling you about earlier, that I bought it for the ability to put a granny flat on, I actually put that granny flat on that property. So you can see a bit of a theme. Property 7, 8, and 9 have all been high cash flow assets. Reason is because the current val is getting close to $8 million, and we're at a good LVR level. I want to be able now to really accelerate the next 5 years of buying some really good assets. I'm making sure I'm quickly getting some good cash flow injections so I can now go back and buy some good capital growth properties. So you can sort of see where my mind's at, and hopefully that's helping add value. You got to know each section of the portfolio where it's going. Is capital growth. All right, now I need to diverse for some cash flow. So you'll notice property 7, 8, and 9 are very cash flow driven properties. So I built a granny flat, paid for it outright on the back of Moore Street. To give you perspective, a granny flats that I secured was $190K. I used a personal loan for that to secure that one, and I paid it off. And that's pretty much incumbent now on the back of Moore Street. So now that rental cash flow, Moore Street was sitting at around 7.5%. Property number 5. I think with the granny flat now, it's getting close to 10% rental yield in a good location in Brisbane too. So that's why I always say my ability now to borrow is getting better, because I got some of these. I got a lot of equity, but now I've got some cash flow to show the bank, hey, easy, lend me some money, all good to go. So that's what I learned with property number 9, is that things like granny flats, can you improve the cash flow of existing properties by adding a secondary dwelling? That was my learning for that one, property number 9. And then property number 10, hopefully by the time this episode go live, it's all done and dusted. But my current learning to this day right now with property number 10 is this, and this might suit maybe business owners or anyone who wants to leverage kind of business into property. Here's my learning, big one. Unfortunately, I had to stay paused on the portfolio for 12 months. And you can imagine, like an active investor like myself, saying 12 months, don't do nothing, was really, really hard for me to soak in. So my mistake I did was I scaled the business, which was amazing. And we got we're doing amazing things now, but I should have went to the bank first before going through the big scale phase, because as soon as you chew into your profits, your borrowing capacity obviously goes down on your P&L, which the bank looks at. So what I should have done was, before we made all the expense, we moved into a new office, we fitted it out. We hired about 4 new people, systems, processes, everything, which has been amazing. But I didn't go to the bank first. So the bank sort of turned around and said, well, hold on, you need to show us more profit for us to be able to let you grab all this equity out. So my mistake was learning what phase in business you are versus your property portfolio. So what I had to do, 12 months, I accepted it, couldn't change it. I just put my head down, bum up, and focused on building the business, building the people, and building the profits. So now, 12 months later, again, I had to stay patient. Now we've gone back to the bank. They've given me the green light. Now we can go buy again. And now I'll secure the assets. Then I might go through a high expense phase of the business to grow it again. So it's just learning where you are in the stage of business. So that was my big learning for property number 10. So fingers crossed, number 10 all goes through. So we're getting close, but that's my biggest lesson is sometimes if you're a business owner, leveraging what you're building as a business, you need to know what cycle you're also in within the business to be able to secure property appropriately. So that's, I guess, my 10 key lessons with securing 10 properties in under 10 years. So again, hopefully some of those tips really added some value. I just want to give you insight. Every single property gave me so many learnings that I carried on into the next one, and hopefully you took something out of it. And probably the last thing I'll leave you with is this, that as high achievers, if you're someone listening, you want to grow a portfolio or you want to grow business or whatever it is, I always believe quality over quantity. Like more doesn't equal better. So don't think you always have to add more properties and things like that. It's not actually about that. You got to understand what's your why. Having 100 properties versus having 10 properties, having 20 properties, or having just 2 properties doesn't mean you're any happier or better if you have more. You got to know what the reason is why you're doing it. The biggest one too is on the way of the mountain, there's always going to be new peaks. You're climbing the mountain and you want more. You're climbing the mountain, you want more. Just remember to enjoy the views as you're climbing the mountain too. So remember your why and remember to enjoy the views, because the views are just as amazing as what's next too. So I think with property, it's such an amazing vehicle. There's a lot of fruit that comes out of it. Just make sure you eat it and enjoy it too. So hopefully that helps. Got some cool goals. I mean, it's exciting. We're at the point in time now. We're coming in 2025. I'll share more of these maybe every few months. I'll let you know how my journey's going, my key lessons, my mistakes too. It doesn't always go to plan. I got so many mistakes. So if that helped, reach out and get out there and get amongst it.